So, but to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into a place where she is nourished for a time and times, and half a time, from the face of the serpent. Now, a time and a time and half a times is basically 3.5 years, or 350 years.
Yes.
Which all works into our generation now of coming out of 400 years of slavery,
The time of the Gentiles.
the time of the Gentiles. So the woman was given 2 great wings of an eagle, and ironically, Israelites were taken over to the land of the eagle, right? The American flag, everything symbol about America is the eagle. To be nourished from time to time from the face of the serpent. So, who does the serpent represent? Well, if we look at Revelation chapter 12, let's go here. Let's read from the beginning.
Revelation chapter 12. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars.
Okay, so we see a crown of 12 stars with this woman. So we know what that 12 stars represents, right?
The children of Israel.
12 tribes.
And she being with child cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born.
All right, so this dragon that is talking about having 7 heads and 10 horns is described later as Babylon, and it goes all the way back to the seed of the serpent in Genesis, when it says, actually let's turn to that real quick. Genesis, keep your hand in here, we're going to come back to Revelation chapter 12. But let's go back to Genesis chapter 1, chapter 3. Chapter 3. And let's read from verse 10. Let's from verse 9. Chapter 3, verse 9.
And the Lord God called unto Adam and said unto him, Where art thou? And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself. And he said, Who told thee that thou was naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat? And the man said, The woman whom thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. And the Lord God said unto the woman, What is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. And the Lord said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle, and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life.
All right, so now we're at Genesis 3, verse 15, and pay close attention to what we're reading here now.
And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel.
Okay, so we see there's thy seed, meaning the serpent seed, and her seed, meaning Eve's seed. So we always hear this, we understand that we are a father's seed, but in terms of lineage. But the woman's seed is important as well, because a woman who is an Israelite can marry somebody who's not an Israelite, and their child is still in Israel because it's the woman's seed, right? the woman's seed is now maybe marrying somebody of another seed, but it's still her seed. So the seed of the woman is very important, as well as the seed of the man. But here we see that there's a difference between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. So there's two seeds, right? Both from Eve, but different fathers. The seed of the serpent and the seed of Eve is obviously Adam's seed. So this enmity between the serpent seed and this woman we're reading about now in Revelations 12 has been since the days of Eve. So let's go back to Revelations chapter 12. Okay. I think we left off at verse 4.
And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days.
1,260 days. That again works out to 3.5 years. And it also, if you go by a year, a day for a year, which is another prophetic term, that goes back to 760, around that time. That's the time when the papacy became supremacy. They called it the supremacy of the papacy. So now you see the woman fleeing from the serpent. This goes all the way back to that time, 1,260 years from the 760 time period up to present. So this present generation is in line with the prophecy if you go by a year for a day. If you go by the 400-year prophecy, where it says after 400 years, the time of the Gentiles shall be completed. 3.5 years is a time, and times and a time. 350 years. This brings us into this present generation, or this present jubilee of the 400 years that we just completed. So 2020 is very significant because it's the end of that 400-year rule, and it puts us actually in line with the times of prophecy. That goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Continue. What verse we're at?
6.
Okay. Go ahead, read 6, yeah.
And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his archangel fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was there a place found any more in heaven.
So, this war has actually been going on since the days when the serpent was cast out of the Garden of Eden. Verse 9.
And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world.
Deceiveth the whole world. Started with the deception of Eve.
Deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him.
Okay, cast out into the earth. I wonder where they were cast out to. Well, in Genesis, after Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, Cain was then sent away, and he was fearful for his life because he said, anyone who finds me
kill
They're going to kill me. So, if Adam and Eve are the only ones, who the heck is he afraid that's going to find him and kill him? The seed of the serpent.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, they were cast out as well. The
Yes.
serpent and his angels were cast out.
Yes.
Where were they cast out to?
Land of Nod.
That's right. There's a scripture that says the land of Nod is where Cain now went
To
to
dwell.
dwell.
Yeah.
And the scriptures also say that Cain was the seed of the wicked one.
Yes.
So without going into too much detail today about that, there's two seeds. The seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. They both come from Eve, so they're both live. They're both living souls.
Both twins.
But we see that there's a difference now between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. There's a separation. So the land of Nod, it's called Nod because the Nodites dwell there. I mean, Israel is called Israel because we dwell there.
Yes.
China's called China because the Chinese dwell there. Russia's called Russia because the Russians dwell there. The land of Nod was called the land of Nod because the Nodites dwelt there. The Nodites were the angels of God that were cast out, and they were later revealed as the Nephilim in the book of Enoch. But this is where the familiar spirits comes from, earthbound spirits, all of that stuff. So, verse 10.
And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ, for the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. And they overcame him by
Hold on. The accuser of our brethren. So another word for Satan or Shaitan or the devil is the accuser.
Yes. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto death.
So what does the blood of the Lamb actually mean?
Blood of the Lamb means Passover.
That's something that only Israelites are allowed to do, right?
Correct.
So God is taking all nations and saying, okay, I'm going to, just like with Noah, I'm going to start over with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's seed. So now, only Jacob's seed, the Israelites, the 12 tribes, are to partake in Passover because they are now being prepared for the first resurrection as the Adamites who are changed to Israelites.
To be the priest of the earth.
That's right. The priests of God over all nations on the earth. So they overcome him by the blood of the Lamb. Passover is very significant because that blood of the Lamb, in the original Passover, the Lamb's blood was put on the doorpost and the angel of death passed over so that we were all saved in our houses. Those who are Israelites today, that's talking about us. That's our ancestors. And even up to the times of Jesus, with the Passover, he reestablished the Passover with a greater promise now, saying that he is the actual lamb. So he's revealing that he is the one that was protecting us. The Spirit, the Christ that was in him, is that same Spirit that was with the children of Israel. And so the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And they love not their lives until death. Let's go to verse 17. Read up the screen.
And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ.
Which keep the commandments of God. Who keeps the commandments of God? Well,
The Israelites.
is there anybody else? I wish there was.
Not Christians.
Well, for starters, they break the seventh-day commandment right off the top. So they're not keeping the commandments.
Not Jews.
Why not?
We are taught
keep the commandments
Yeah.
and the testimony of Jesus
But
Christ.
all they do is just read the 5 books. That's the Torah.
Right.
They do not do anything about Jesus.
Right. So the
Yes.
testimony of Jesus Christ is the new covenant.
Covenant, yeah.
So we keep the commandments of God and the
And
testimony
testimony,
of
yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Correct.
So it doesn't matter what ideology or theology, whatever, if you're not keeping the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ, this is not talking about you. So the first resurrection. Let's look at what it really means. What is this first resurrection? Revelation chapter 5, verse 9.
And they sung a new song, saying, Thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof. For thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to God by thy blood, out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation.
Hast redeemed us to God by thy blood, the blood of the Lamb. Now, as I was saying, 3,600 years ago, when the children of Israel came out of Egypt, the blood of the Lamb, that blood actually runs through our veins. Israel is the Lamb. We're all Israelites. So, thou hast redeemed all, from all kindreds and tongues and people, all of those who have the blood of the Lamb. This is the first resurrection. First, he's redeeming those who are actual Israelites by heritage. And Israelite by heritage doesn't just mean because you're born an Israelite. You have to actually keep the commandments of God
Laws, statutes,
and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Okay. Revelation 7, verse 4.
And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel.
144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. I think you made a statement earlier about someone said, which tribe is, which gate is for the Christians?
Yeah.
All of the tribes of the children of Israel. If you don't come in one of those gates, you ain't getting in. Jesus said you can't climb up, over, you can't climb through the window. You got to come through the door, right? And when you enter into the door, you're led to these 12 gates. Verse 1.
And I looked, and lo, a Lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads.
Okay, so we see here, the Lamb is there again, and with him 144,000, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of the children of
Israel.
with their father, his father's name written in their heads. So they know who they are. They're the children of
Israel.
So they know who their father is, right?
Correct.
See, a lot of people, they, and unfortunately, there's a Hebrew Israelite doctrine that separates Judah from Israel, not realizing that they are one. The kingship was just given to King David. The new covenant is with the house of Judah and the house of Israel. That's the same thing coming together, the oneness. And Judah knows who his father is.
Israel.
From the house of Judah, you know who your father is, right?
Yes, you're an Israelite.
Yes, you're an Israelite. Not a Hebrew Israelite,
No, you're an
an
Israelite.
Israelite.
Yes.
Hebrews can be, Esau can be a Hebrew, right?
Yeah.
Correct, yes.
Because Esau is
King of
from Abraham. Exactly.
Abraham. Not Abraham.
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 That was
That's
the
right.
Hebrew. Yes.
Now that's Ishmael,
Yeah.
who's also a Hebrew, because he
Yeah.
came from Abram. But Abraham had 6 other sons.
Yes, that are Hebrews.
Yeah. And then Isaac. But Isaac was separated and given the spirit Israel. So that seal, that name was upon Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and his descendants. Okay, Revelation chapter 7, verse 9 now.
After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude which no man could number, of all nations, and kindreds, and people, and tongues, stood before the throne, and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, and palms in their hands.
Okay, so now, they're before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, and palms in their hand. A multitude which no man could number, of all nations, kindreds, and people, and tongues, stood before the Lamb, and before the throne, and before the Lamb. So these, from every nation, is fulfilling the promise that God made to Abraham when he said, your seed shall be as the stars,
Yep.
if you can count them.
And all nations.
Right, so that seed, that promised seed, was to Isaac and his descendants through Jacob. Not Esau, through Jacob. But Esau would also be a heathen.
Yeah, because he said, God, he told Esau, I will still make you a great nation.
That's right.
Right? So he's still part of the God of our fathers. So he still has a part. He still has something to get also.
That's right.
Him and his seed.
That's
I'll come the part again.
And Esau, that's a whole other story, but once he serves, then he goes off into his own
Yeah,
his
he
own
has his
thing.
own covenant.
Yes. Revelation 7, verse 13.
And one of the elders answered, saying unto me, what are these which are arrayed in white robes, and whence came they?
Okay, so there's a bunch of them from every nation. God's redeeming Israelites from every nation, wherever they've been scattered to. Whatever tongue they speak, nobody speaks Hebrew anymore. They speak a form of Yiddish. But whatever tongue you speak, whatever nation you've been driven to, because we've been scattered to whatever nation on the earth, and he's gathering them all together. And he says in verse 14,
And I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest. And he said unto me, These are they which came out of the great tribulation,
out of great tribulation.
out of great tribulation, and have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb.
So, out of great tribulation, I specified that because the great tribulation is something
Different.
right. So these are they that came out of great tribulation. I hate to say it, but our ancestors went through great tribulation.
400 years.
400 years of great tribulation. And have washed their robes. What is symbolic of washing your robe?
Baptism.
And have made them white in the blood of the Lamb. What is symbolic of the blood of the Lamb?
That's Passover.
Right. So, in order to be sealed as an Israelite, you have to be baptized, and you have to suck.
Yes.
You have to keep Passover. This is the entry point to keeping the law, statutes, and commandments. So this psalm says they sung a new song. We're singing it. We're living it.
O Lamb of Israel.
Everlasting Father. 20 verse 6.
Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years.
Okay, so here we have that 1,000-year period again. And those who take part in the first resurrection, of such the second death hath no power. That's true salvation. Because the second death is when all nations, all the dead and the living and everyone is all called before the throne to be judged. That's after the millennial reign with Christ. All of the ones called from every nation, even the Quran speaks of that. And they're judged by the works. So, the first resurrection is only for Israelites, which means Paul, who was teaching the Gentiles, was now baptizing them unto the second resurrection. So, the Christians are being redeemed for the second resurrection. So now with the second resurrection, they have this testimony that they believed and they were baptized. You know, that could prevent them from being cast into the lake of fire. Personally, I prefer to be part of the first resurrection because on such the second death hath no power. You've passed. You've accepted the Christ in your lifetime. You've humbled yourself to do His will, and you've been redeemed. Therefore, you're part of the first resurrection. So when you die, what happens? Well, let's look at Hosea chapter 6, verse 1 and 2.
Come, let us return unto the Lord, for He hath torn, and He will heal us. He hath smitten, and He will bind us up. After 2 days will He revive us. In the third day He will raise us up, and we shall live in His sight.
So here we have the third day again, and God is non-linear. So let's open our minds to the mind of Christ. Because this third day we know represents Jesus the Christ being resurrected. It also represents the third day when the kingdom of David is being established. And it also represents our personal walk with Christ, because when we die, after 3 days, like Jesus, we will be resurrected. And He will bind us up, and in the third day He raise us to live in His sight. So this is a path that has been given to the children of Israel of the first resurrection. Now, when we get baptized, we learn the significance of this because, like Jesus, we fast for 40 days after we're baptized. And that 40-day fast is actually preparing us for our celestial reign with Christ. Because after 3 days we're risen, and like Jesus the Christ, He stuck around for 40 days, teaching and putting things in order before He ascended. So He's shown us the path of life, that do these things, and after 3 days, you also will be risen up and be like unto the angels, being like the children of the resurrection, ascending souls. So after 40 days now, we ascend. So this song of baptism and Passover is not a regular song. You know, that's not what's sung in the churches today. We're actually preparing for the first resurrection. That's what it represents. Revelation 20 verse 5.
But the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection.
Okay, so the rest of the dead live not again until after 1,000 years are finished. So all those who take part of the first resurrection are foreparents and stuff who may have been, God chooses in generations. It's not for us. God chooses, right?
We don't know.
Right, like with Elijah the prophet. God said to him, I have a bunch of prophets you don't even know about. So don't worry about it. So this generation now, God is choosing people. This generation. And those who are sealed for the first resurrection after 3 days, you're arised. Or as we read earlier, those who are with Him when He comes, or remain until He comes, will be caught up with the angels. So in other words, that mountain, you have the angels coming down, and you have the Israelites coming up to meeting on Mount Sinai, which is a spiritual mount. It's not a physical mount that everyone's going to run to. It's a spiritual mount. So the significance of the first resurrection is very, very intense, because it is true salvation. It's true salvation because the second death hath no power. If you're baptized as an Israelite, by an Israelite, you've perfected your faith. Jesus said, suffer it so, for it is for us to fulfill our righteousness. So that now is passed on to us. In order to fulfill our righteousness, you must be born again of water and of the Spirit. What people don't realize is that Spirit is Israel. So if you're not born again of that spirit as an Israelite, you're not part of the first resurrection. And that's why everyone in this Bible that baptized was an Israelite. If they weren't an Israelite, then you're getting baptized into something else, which is called the second death. It's a covenant of death. But we'll go into that one another day. So, what people don't realize is that Israel is both Lord and Christ, the man and the spirit. That's the two-edged sword. So we have Jesus, or Yeshua, or however you want to pronounce it, as the physical representation of the Lamb, Israel. And then you have the Christ Spirit, which is the Lion, which is the spiritual representation of the Lamb, Israel. So when Jesus said, I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, he's saying, I am the Lamb, and the Lion is in me.
Physical and the spiritual.
The physical and the spiritual. Exactly. Acts chapter 2, verse 35 at the bottom here.
Therefore, let all the house of Israel know assuredly that God hath made that same Jesus, whom ye have crucified, both Lord and Christ.
Right. And Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He wasn't saying he was God. He's saying he's the Son of God. Israel is thy son, even thy firstborn. So, Lord of the ages, the Ancient of Days, this fact that the earth is only 6,000 years old, you know, I'm not into theologies and ideologies. People can believe what they want. If they want to believe the world is 6,000 years, that's fine. But I'm into revelation. So the revelation that the reality that something happened before Adam and Eve. Because God said on the sixth day when he made man, he said, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Replenish means refill or repopulate. Which means something happened before. Otherwise you wouldn't have to say replenish the earth, refill it, repopulate it. And in context, some might say, well, refill doesn't really mean, what does refill really mean? And they'll pull up the Strong's Concordance and come with all these whatever. But the reality is, when God spoke to Noah and his sons, he said to them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth.
Yes.
Okay, so we know now there was a flood. So you have to repopulate. So when he said replenish the earth, he means repopulate. So there's a lot more going on here than meets the eye. This Bible here is giving us a 6,000-year history. This is our history. But the Ancient of Days is eternal. We ought not to try and take the Most High and compress him into 6,000 years. That's just showing that we have a limited understanding of the Most High.
Correct.
It says he is eternal. Eternal is not 6,000 years. Eternal is eternal. So let's look at some of the ages before we go back to the ancient ages. So right now, those who are born from 1944 to 1960, right now they would be between either 60 and 76 years of age. This is the baby boomers, the baby boomers age. This is after World War II, so we know what happened, right? Everyone came home and they got to booming. That's right. Okay,
At that
so
time there were about 3 women to 1 man. Because the men died out, right?
That's
so
right.
the one who remained alive, men living in glory.
So there are times when a man actually can take on more than one wife, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
So in the Generation X, those are people born from 1961 to 1980 who would be 40 to 59 years of age. So, if you turn 40 this year, you're part of Generation X. And Generation S is significant because this generation is the generation where,
That's a separate reveal from.
yeah, this generation lives through all of the other, the information age, like the internet wasn't even created yet, 1980, right? So, imagine you were born before the internet existed. Those who are younger might find that a little strange because the next generation, Generation Y, also known as the millennials, is everyone born from 1981 to 1994. So you would be 26 to 39 years of age, and that's the information age. So they were born with the internet, right? We live most of our lives in Generation X, the baby boomers. There was no such thing as the internet. We had typewriters, right? The information age now has computers. So these millennials have a different mindset because they're brought up with this technology.
It was dial-up. Like, it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah, I wasn't all the way there yet.
Yeah.
It was just starting out.
So then we have Generation Z, which is 1995 to 2015. So this is the new generation, Generation Z, in the digital age. They would be anywhere from 5 years old to 25 years old. And digital age, meaning they're born in the time where everything's digital, with your cell phone, my laptops, what do you call it, tablets and stuff like that, right? So it's beyond the information age, the digital age. You got babies. I see little 5-year-olds with phones and with they can get around the tablet better than I can. They can barely speak, but they can find videos and everything. Blows my mind.